Welcome to another episode of the AMBO podcast. My guest this week is Melissa Saleh. She is a mom, she's an entrepreneur, and she is a writer. And in our episode this week, we discuss miscarriage and infant loss. And I want to put that right out in the front because I want to first of all, I want to hold space for her to have this conversation. But I also want to make sure that if you are someone who is not ready for this conversation, then this is the ticker tape across the front of the episode. And so if you are not ready for it, I hope that you join me next week for another episode. If you are someone who has been looking for this, then this week's episode is definitely for you. She is 10 years into an infant loss, post-infant loss journey. She is sharing her story. She is beginning to put those pieces out into the world as a lighthouse for those behind her after a journey of such a solo experience, no matter if you are surrounded by a lot of people and what that means to her. So I'm not going to summarize anything that she discusses because the episode is incredible. I sat with goosebumps for the entire conversation. And I think that what happens when you encounter people like her is you're drawn to the story, not in a sensationalizing way or as in a, oh my gosh, but when you see someone who stands so firmly in who they are and speaks so openly about the pain and the trauma, that level of vulnerability and that level of strength it encourages connection because we all have, even if you have not experienced miscarriage or you have not experienced infant loss, that there is a strand of fear and vulnerability that comes with pregnancy that I think that we can all relate to in some way, shape, or form, whether it's during the journey to get pregnant, whether it's the pregnancy journey itself, whether it is the postpartum or the delivery and all of that. And so people like Michelle who have experienced something so profound and life-altering, for them to hold the space and open that up for other people. It is a phenomenal experience and it's a phenomenal thing to witness. So I want to thank her a million times over for sharing her story. And I will continue to follow along and I will continue to try and help in any way, shape, or form that I can when she is ready to release her story out into the world. So we discussed that a little bit in the episode, but she is really still very much in the work that she's doing beyond the loss of her daughter and understanding that the healing will not always be linear. And so thank you to Melissa for joining me this week. And thank you to her for sharing her story. And here she is. Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hello and welcome back to the And Both podcast. I am here with Melissa Saleh. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
So let's start where we always start, which is please, if you can tell everyone, introduce yourself and let people know what you want them to know about you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Melissa Saleh. I have had multiple careers. Let's just say I tend to get bored and want to move on. I began my career as a corporate lawyer in New York City. I transitioned out of law to become a writer and editor. I wrote for places like the New York Times, the Huffington Post. I was an editor at Newsweek. I had a deep love of storytelling combined with technology. So I transitioned into tech and startups, made my way out to Silicon Valley, worked with Facebook and other big tech companies, then moved to LA, and during the pandemic started an AI company with my husband. That's all my resume. Who I really am is a survivor of infant loss and trauma. I have been pregnant 7 times. And finally, in October 2020, I gave birth to my beautiful, healthy elder daughter. And then 16 months later, in a surprise, I gave birth to my second living daughter. And I had those babies at 42 and 43 entirely naturally after a very, very difficult fertility journey in my 30s. So it was not a given that I would be able to conceive and carry healthy babies in my 40s with no medical assistance. That was the result of a massive, massive life change that began after my first child passed away during labor. So that's who I really am. That journey has so defined me. It has taken me on a journey that I still can't believe happened. And it has really defined who I am in this world.
You know what I think is just so incredible about, or so poignant about what you just said, was that this is my resume, but this is really me. And I think that it's just something that we get so stuck in the resume mode that it's easy to feel like I am doing the things, right? Like all of those things are incredible. All the career things are incredible, but yet the
They're
pays
fine.
the bills.
But I'll tell you this, the work that I did to bring my daughters into the world was 1,000 times harder and more intense and more dedicated and more rewarding than any work I have done in the career pedigree status resume world. I found my true self in working towards bringing my children into the world.
Yeah. And I think that's the part too. It's like you have the resume side, but you also have the like at my core, not like at my core, this is me. And this feeds out into those areas, right? The core of you feeds into writing, feeds into probably the decision to go to law school and whatever, however that journey went along, and moving and doing all of those pieces and being able to be so connected to the why you do these things. And I mean, that's an amazing, I know that people say I'm sorry when there's loss and it's like, thanks, great. Like, I don't know you, but that is just, it's unbelievable to be able to, I don't know, to be able to stand again. Like, I mean, that like takes the wind out of me just to hear that happening. And so I cannot imagine the process of going through that and how you get to the other side of that and what life looks like beyond that.
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that. I couldn't imagine it either. And I had no models. I was a writer in New York City. I had access to any book ever written, any talk. There was no one. There was no one who had had a loss as devastating and extreme as mine, who had come through it and fought their way out and said, you know what? And look at what I have built in the aftermath. And so some part of me, even in the depths of darkness, when it was not even clear I would survive, because many women, we go through so much pain. And there's no manual that it's not like breaking a leg where, okay, in 6 weeks, you will get the cast off. So it's extremely painful now, but you really only have to make it 6 weeks. You go through something like this, there is no guarantee you will ever feel better. And there is no guarantee you will ever heal. And there's also no guarantee you will ever have a healthy child. Nobody can give you that. So you are living in the most incredible limbo of unknowns, and you are in unbelievable pain, and you have no idea if it will stop, and if so, when. And so the work I do now in the form of writing, in the form of appearing on podcasts like this, is to help me 10 years ago, to help anybody who needs what I needed 10 years ago, which is, hey, guess what? You can get through it. You will if you want to. And not only get through it, you can transcend. You can create a life. Is it a life that's happy, happy, joy, joy? Never. I carry this and I will carry this for the rest of my life. The pain that I feel, I have learned to live with because it will never go away. You do not just get over losing a child. And it is a hard thing with stillbirth and infant loss because you lose a human being. There are funeral arrangements, there are autopsies, there are really horrible things that come with the loss of a human being, but you never got to truly know that human being. Or maybe as a mother you did because you carried that baby, but nobody else knew that human being. Not really. And you are very alone in your loss because you are not grieving a person that other people knew and loved necessarily.
Yeah.
Not the way you did, not the way you did as the mother. And everyone else, my first child's father, her grandparents, they felt the loss. I'm in no way trying to say that they didn't grieve and that they didn't hurt or suffer. But it can be extremely isolating as the mother because when you are going through a piece of your body and your soul have died and nobody can ever give that back to you. And you don't have any of the beautiful memories of your child, to bringing your child home and seeing your child walk for the first time. And you don't get any of that beauty. And your life is now a giant kind of question mark of what does a life even look like after a loss like this? And it's extremely socially isolating because in our society, people are not comfortable with losses like this. It's not supposed to happen. It happens incredibly frequently. I had one of the top medical practices on the Upper East Side caring for me in my first pregnancy. I was at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. I come from a family of doctors. That is no guarantee.
Yeah.
There was never any clear cause for her passing. They did an autopsy, they did placental tests. These are unexplained. And it is astonishingly common. And then there are issues like SIDS. There is infant loss for a number of reasons. And it's not anyone's fault, but society doesn't like it. They don't want to address it. They don't want to hear about it. And they really want you to kind of put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole and fix yourself up and move on.
Oh my gosh. I'm just thinking about, like, I've been reading more about, like, talking about childcare and policy changes and all of that stuff. And something that I never considered, I've had 4 healthy pregnancies, and it's a terrifying experience to be pregnant and still have a healthy pregnancy. And I tell my kids this all the time is, like, I was terrified for 40 plus weeks because they all showed up late to the party. I was terrified that that I would do something wrong, or I wouldn't do anything wrong, or there's no knowing. It's such a great unknown. And it's this time of, like, serious, everything is crazy. And hearing about policy changes, and they're talking about people that are not being given their leave from work. So people that were previously able to have a maternity leave, if they experience loss or stillbirth, that they are being denied their leave and expected to go back to work.
All I can say to that is I thought I was being so smart. I thought I was outsmarting our horrible modern workforce. I started my fertility journey when I was an editor at Newsweek. So I had a full-time job. However, I had a full-time job in media, and media is a cratering industry. It has been on the decline for 20 years since I entered the media industry, because technology has completely changed any type of monetization in the industry, and it has just never caught up. We trained people that you can read or watch things on the internet for free, and so everyone reads and watches on the internet for free. And the media industry has never recovered. So I knew I'm not in a particularly stable industry. And this is not, Newsweek was losing millions. And I was like, I know enough about billionaires who own companies to know that they don't like losing millions. And so this is not going to be a long-term employment strategy. So as soon as I started the fertility journey, I thought, well, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to go work in tech. I'm going to work in startups. There's much more money there. Yeah, I know. Utterly stupid. I know, but I was, looking around, trying to figure out how
it looks good on the outside. It looks like that's
I love tech and I love startups. And I was trying to, and both. I was trying to figure out how can I have motherhood and how can I have the career I love without stopping the career because I needed money. My husband and I split the bills at that time. It was my first husband in New York City. And I didn't want to put my career on hold. And so I took a job that wasn't as rigorous as a job I normally would have taken because I knew I was undergoing a fertility journey. And I do eventually get pregnant and I, race out of the office in Dumbo and I take the train to NYU Fertility Center. And I have this horrible 7 or 8 week appointment with, someone I'd never seen before who comes in and, he practically has a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He doesn't really, but he does the ultrasound and he goes, oh yeah, this was never going to be a healthy pregnancy. And that was my first pregnancy. And my heart dies. And it was an early miscarriage. And I had to go into the bathroom of the industrial building in Dumbo to miscarry a week or two later. And I know now this is an incredibly common situation that so many women in the working world have to deal with. I then told the male founders of the company what had happened. And they fired me 2 weeks later, despite the fact that I had created miracles in the 6 months that I was there. I'm an ex-lawyer, so, I was like, did you guys read my resume? You think you can just do this? Legally, I'm not going to go further into what happened, but let's just say I'm not a person that takes that kind of thing lying down. I'm going to tell you, hey, that wasn't cool. And then I'm going to tell you, and here's what you need to do to make it right.
And here's why.
I don't know if they care why. They wound up blowing through a $50 million Series B and fire selling the company. So, karma, I believe in karma. But I then looked around and I said, you know what? There is no employer that is safe. There is no employer that cares. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start my own company because I'm going to bet on myself. I believe in myself. And I did. And I got that company going and it paid my salary very well for several years. The problem was I was running my own company when my daughter passed. And it was such a wake-up call as to, I was a first-time founder and I made all the mistakes. It was a services business. It was content strategy. So when you look across the spectrum, companies, brands, thought leaders, everyone was becoming a content creator. And I had all these skills in how to launch a content platform, run it, make it great, make it viral, create content calendars and run them over time. And so we offered those services to big companies. We worked with Google, Citibank, et cetera. And it was a small team, but I realized I'm doing everything. I was doing the legal. I was doing payroll. I was doing all the recruiting, the client acquisition. I was doing a lot of the client work. I also then realized a lot of my clients wouldn't work with other people on my team. They only wanted me, which is a big problem. I was a first-time operator, so I hadn't prepared for all of those contingencies, even when I did go out on maternity leave. And then my daughter passed, and it became, the power of autopilot. I was able to run that company on autopilot for a year and a half after she passed. But then the entire thing crashed down when I became pregnant again and lost that pregnancy in another story at 14 weeks. The entire thing crashed down. I had to shut down the company. There was I probably in a different state of mind could have created an exit strategy, maybe exited, sold it, something. I was such a wreck and so burned out from this work, in addition to the grief, the trauma. I shut the entire thing down. And I still don't have a great solution for how anybody can navigate going back to work after something like this happens, because you're not the same person. You are never going to be the same person. Someone has pulled your soul out and put it through a meat grinder. You are not going to be the same. You're not going to be the same employee. The world does not look the same to you at all. I have completely, my life has gone in such a completely different direction after this happened. And the medical consequences are so intense. I developed PTSD. Also, you want to talk about postpartum depression, postpartum rage. I call it postpartum devastation when you have a loss like that. Because you have everything postpartum, but you have none of the joy. You only have grief and pain. In addition to your milk coming in and the bleeding and losing your hair and the hormones and then don't even get me started on society's reaction to it and the unbelievably myopic and hurtful things that people say. And they never mean to say it. They don't mean to hurt you, but the hurt is just as acute, whether they mean it or not. So that's a very difficult situation.
And like, that's the idea, right? Is like productivity overall, right? It's like, oh, I am so sorry that this happened. Is there a chance you could get me that thing by Friday? Mm-hmm. And you're like, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. And like, if I did that thing, I'm going to put it through a paper shredder before I ever send it your way. Thank you very much.
I mean, I don't even know what to say about that, because I'm now on the other side. My husband and I started an AI company in 2020, right as our older daughter was born. And I think a lot about, okay, what is our policy going to be if that happens to somebody at this company?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I think it's at minimum 6 months unpaid leave. Take 6 months. Your job will be here. Take your pay. We will pay it. That is the human thing to do. Now, at the end of 6 months, the idea that in 6 months you're going to be okay is insane. But I would never want to tell someone your job won't be here. And as a company, I'm not sure. It would depend what kind of role that person had. Maybe we keep the role open for them. And I don't know. I honestly don't know, because I do have empathy for the needs of business owners and people who are running businesses. I think that the corporate world is not set up for women and babies. It's just not. It's set up for men. This is how it was created. And women stay at home. That was what the corporate system was created for. I think we need to dramatically reimagine how we have babies in the working world. I will say work kept me alive during that time. I needed work because it was the only thing that I had. That company, shutting it down was unbelievably painful because it was the only thing that I had created after, almost 15 years of living in New York. It was the only thing that I had created that still lived, because my marriage certainly died during that time. And a lot of other things died too. So I don't take a stance that, the workforce is mean and horrible and unfeeling. I think there are two sides to it. I don't have a great solution other than employers need to understand that this happens. And when it happens, that person's life has had a bomb go off and their life will never be the same. And that just that's part of the human journey. And if you're going to have a company that is made up of humans, which they still are, you are going to have to accept that that is a possibility.
Yeah, you've got to, and I think too, like the idea of saying, 6 months will hold that, you take your pay, it's incredibly generous given what most people are expecting or most people are seeing. But I think the other part that's important about that is that doing that for somebody, and this is not like locking anybody into anything, but like doing that for somebody, if that became the norm, then that person gets 6 months where they don't have to worry about all of the things that come along with the job, health insurance, they would be able to actually get access to the healthcare, the mental health care, and all of their follow-ups and anything like that they need. They don't have to worry about that. So you really, essentially, because your job funds your life, you're that would be giving somebody the space to be able to truly take care of themselves. And that, too, like if they've got little kids, like older kids, and that happens, it allows someone to really cocoon and then sort through as much as they can, as much as they want to, as much as they're okay with over that time and come out on the end. And I feel like if that's a space, like if you can hold a space like that person, if they come to you at 6 months and they say, thank you so much, I cannot imagine how I would have come into the office. I also am not ready to come back. And I know that I need to move on. And that is treating, like you're saying, that is treating the person like a person. That is understanding where they're coming from. And that is wanting to move forward in a business model that actually acknowledges humans as humans.
Yeah.
That is so...
there may be a corporate cost, but, too bad. Like, honestly, I think the way that we view cost is somewhat skewed. There are long-term costs, there are human costs, there are labor costs, and then there are pure bottom line payroll costs. And you had said, I think we had talked about this before I had hit the record button, but you had said that you are writing the book that you wish that you had, or you are putting the writing together that you needed when you were in that position. So what does that sound like? What is what you needed in that time? Well, I'm a storyteller. That's how I've made my living my whole life. I was raised by books. My deepest love in the world is storytelling. I've learned more from reading Shakespeare that has made me successful in startups than from ever reading any kind of business book. And that's true of politics as well. It's also true of marriage in a lot of respects. So I believe in telling stories. I believe in healing through telling stories. And I believe in finding greater truth through telling stories. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sharing my story in my way. And I'm a writer that has a bit of a history of creating some controversy. I've written some things in the past that have gotten me some hot water. I was attacked by Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly once.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It's funny. I wrote something that seemed very ill-advised and stupid back in 2009, but it now feels very eerily prophetic. And I was writing about a tragic death. And I was writing about Ted Kennedy had just died. And Ted Kennedy was considered the Lion of the Senate. And he had introduced just world-changing, or at least country-changing legislation during his career in the Senate. But he wasn't always that. He was a spoiled, obnoxious Kennedy who assumed he would be president because his brothers. And then there was the tragic death of Mary Jo Kopechne, arguably very much caused by Ted Kennedy. And Ted Kennedy, we'll never know the exact truth, but he may have tried to cover up her death for political reasons. That's a horrific tragedy. And she deserved so much better. But I did ask the question, is a tragic death like that somehow, and this is a terrible phrase and I shouldn't have used it, but is it somehow, at least in the long run, worth it because of the incredible change and incredible good that happened as a result of that tragedy? Now, is it worth it in the sense that she should have been happy to give her life? Of course not. But she did. It happened. We can't change it today. So is there a way to look at this tragedy and say, he would never have been this incredible senator fighting for the rights of people. He just wouldn't had this not happened. And it changed American history. That death it changed the course of American history. It changed millions of people's lives. Again, not saying it was worth it, but I'm at least asking the question. Like, I was trying to get at the question. I was I was raked across the coals by the left and the right. Oh, you're tone deaf and you're horrible. And how can you even ask this question? It's still one of the dominant questions of my life because then 4 years later, 5 years later, I went through my own horrific tragedy and my own horrific tragic death experience. And that has inextricably changed my life to the core. And, you can ask me, well, was it worth it? Of course, it was not worth it. It never will be. But every single thing that has happened in the aftermath, and a lot of very incredible things have happened, remarkable things, things that doctors say are impossible, et cetera, all happened because of that death. They absolutely would not have happened otherwise. And my life is so changed. My living children's lives are so changed. The marriage I'm in, I don't know if it ever would have happened. There's a chance. It's funny. We had definitely been in rooms together in New York and never really met. And then my husband and I finally met when we both kind of relocated to LA. But I'm a writer that has created a lot of controversy in the past. I don't want to, and I don't intend to, but I tell stories and I ask hard questions. And that's what I am taking on with this project.
That's the hardest question, I think, when you consider you in that question. Like you're not looking at it in an analytical piece on the outside. It's not worth as in value. It's worth as in some other definition.
Exactly. Worth it is like, it's kind of like the Inigo Montoya line, like, the right kept using that phrase. I do not think it means what you think it means. I was not saying worth it in the way I thought I was saying. But, the women who go through experiences like this, whether it's infertility, miscarriage at any point, stillbirth, infant loss, like every loss is a loss and every loss is unique and extremely painful. And we deserve hard questions, at least being asked and discussed. And we deserve the real truth, the quote unquote ugly truth that people don't want us to talk about at parties being discussed. We deserve those kinds of stories being told because that's our reality. I didn't get the mommy and me experience. I got two friends I met in stillbirth support group and we held each other's hands when we had to scatter ashes, when we had to donate the contents of a nursery that will never be used, when we had to go to postpartum appointments and get autopsy results. That was our postpartum experience. And I am so grateful that I had those women because who the heck else would even engage with me about that kind of stuff, let alone really be in it with me. And so the sense of being so alone and also the sense of why is this happening to me? Why are all these other people having healthy babies? I ate organic food. I did everything they tell you to do. Why did this woman's baby, she smoked her whole pregnancy. Why is her baby fine? That is one of the hardest questions, and you never get an answer until you find your own answer. No one can give you that answer. You have to find it, but I can at least tell a story where I asked that question. And I don't know if I found my answer, but I found an answer. And I want to give that to others.
You're building the lighthouse for others.
Oh, so that's my goal.
And I think that the hardest part about the lighthouse is someone has to build the first lighthouse. Like people can crash onto the shore over and over and over again, but someone's got to wade out into the place where the weather is bad and it's hard to build and you can't get the supplies there.
That's
and they've got to drag it out and build the thing. And then after that, everyone just builds a light post down the coastline or the lighthouses down the coastline based on where that lighthouse is and how that gets done.
That's exactly right. And I'm so moved by you saying that. And the reason is I left New York. My life was in ashes. Every single thing I had built in New York burned to the ground. Marriage, gone. No living children, had to close the company, lost my professional reputation, lost most of my community. I wound up through a turn of events in Charleston, South Carolina. I wound up owning a house there. And I was just put all my effort into rehabbing this house. And I had no plan. I had no future. I was just rock bottom in Charleston, South Carolina. And the thing about Charleston, South Carolina, William Faulkner used to talk about, Southerners in the past, there is a deep respect for the dead in a lot of cities in the South. And there are graveyards all through the city. And there are graveyards for infants. There are graves for infants. There is actually a stillborn baby and her mother buried in one of the graveyards, and people line up to see the mother's ghost because apparently she appears to visit her baby on the baby's birthday. While I was there, I managed to make it to a Christmas party. The first, when you're going through something like this, going to a Christmas party was such an act of, I don't know, of pure faith. And I met a nice man and, we went on a few dates. I was very open with him about like, hey, I don't think you want to bark up this tree. But on one of the dates, I asked him, look, I'm not a normal person. I'm not going to ask you a normal question right now. I'm moving to San Francisco on a contract with Facebook. I need to scatter my daughter's ashes. I don't know where to do it. Do you know a place? And he said, I've got a place. I said, great. He took me out to this cove off of Folly Beach, which is about 30 minutes outside of Charleston. And he walked me past, the road ends and you walk down a path that, most people wouldn't necessarily know about. You kind of have to know it's there. And you wind up at this beautiful cove. And while you're there, you look out and it is the historic Morris Island lighthouse. And it was built hundreds of years ago and it's now a historic landmark. And it just sits there. And this cove is it's on the beach, but it's separated from the rest of the beach. So there's a sort of rock wall and there are pylons. And so it's secluded. And that is where I scattered her ashes into the ocean. And so I never wanted to visit a grave. I didn't want to visit a graveyard. But at her birthday, it was just the 10-year, it would have been her 10th birthday in August. I go to Morris Island and I see the lighthouse and I pay my respects. So it's really beautiful that you brought up that lighthouse. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, I am so blown away by the strength of, 10 years. See, I imagine that 10 years feels like a minute some days.
It feels like a minute.
Yeah.
I remember everything about the night I went into labor. I remember everything about getting to the hospital. I remember everything. I'm a writer for a reason. I have a tremendous recall. I used to do interviews and barely take notes, and I remember everything. And that isn't always good. And the power of trauma is that you remember everything, but you can't always put it into very clear, cohesive narrative. Like you can't be like, okay, this happened and then that happened and then I went through this and then it's all happened at once and it just sort of hit your nervous system with a bomb, and it's very, very difficult. I remember my daughter's face. I looked at, they handed me my baby. I looked at every finger and every toe, just as any mother would. I put her on my chest. You remember everything and you always will.
Yeah.
And I've had to, I love watching the sports greats talk about how they achieve impossible things. And I love watching Michael Jordan talk about, the game where someone gave him arguably a poisoned pizza. And so he had a playoff game the next day and he was throwing up and everything and could barely step on the court. But then he says, I dug deep. I found a place that I had never found before. I dug deep. And then he goes out and scores, almost 40 points and they win the game. I think about that almost every day. I'm like, all right, Michael Jordan, like I see you're digging deep and I raise you even deeper. I'm gonna dig deep today. And tomorrow, if I need to, I'll dig deeper. And I'm just going to trust after 10 years and after this much work and after building so much. And I will say, my life today is 10 times more beautiful than anything I ever could have imagined on August 15, 2014, which is the day my daughter passed and was born. It is stunningly beautiful. And I am so grateful. But every single thing that I have today is a result of digging deep. None of it just showed up. I had to dig deep every single day, every single minute of every single day. And I know I am not the only one. And the incredible, I don't know, serendipity of winding up at Facebook was that all of a sudden I was working with Mark Zuckerberg's team and the communications team at Facebook to kind of create a new narrative around the company, highlighting all of their work on social good and communities. And what are the biggest communities on Facebook, or at least at that time? Motherhood. And one of the biggest topics of conversation, pregnancy loss, infant loss, infertility, how to deal with these issues. Mark Zuckerberg himself had just gone through 3 miscarriages with his wife. Billionaires have miscarriages. Everybody is subject to this. And there are millions of people, women in particular, dealing with this kind of pain. And so it really did allow me to see, oh, I am not alone. That being said, I'm not alone, but I need a role model. And there's a John Legend song. I searched for the leader, and the leader is me. And so finally, I just went, well, I guess I have to be the role model that I've been looking for. And that's, you know what? It's never going to be okay, and it's never going to be like, everything's happy, joy. But it's an incredible life. It's a beautiful life, and so I have that. But I work every single day.
I was going to say, do you feel like the process of going through the writing and the putting it on paper, and you remember all of the details, but giving them a place, a physical place outside of your body?
Absolutely.
Do you feel like that helps? I always liken these things to like a filing cabinet. Like when stuff hits the fan, it's like someone took the filing cabinet, they opened all the drawers and they turned it upside down. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I know everything's here. I have to figure out how to put it all back together. And some files take longer than others to shift through.
You are 1,000% right. You are describing my writing process right now. It's all here. Getting it down in a cohesive narrative. And I know when it's not cohesive because I'm a trained storyteller. I made my living doing this for many years. And I arguably still make my living doing this because so much of startup founding and scaling a startup is storytelling. There has to be the narrative, and it has to be paced, and it has to bring in all of the rules of storytelling. You can't have a Chekhov's gun without using it. And, you bring in your protagonist and you immediately have them climb a tree and you throw rocks at them. I think that was also was that a Chekhov quote? All of the sort of tenets of storytelling are there. But I gotta, as you said, I gotta put all those files back into the file cabinet so that it's cohesive and makes sense. And that is work. It's also very healing because, as you said, it does take it out of you, and it takes it out of your mind and your nervous system, and it puts it down in a place. And I do it for others. I also do it for my living children and my family now, because I've been reading Desmond Tutu's book on forgiveness for a lot of reasons. I got some people I need to forgive, myself included. When you have a loss like this, you got to forgive yourself every day. How did I let this happen? And I've now come to the piece with that it wasn't up to me. It just wasn't. It was not up to me. A whole nother conversation about this is generational trauma. And I learned after my loss that my grandmother had almost an identical stillbirth. Oh. I never knew it because the family buried it and wouldn't speak about it. So that's a whole nother conversation. I'll write my next book will be about generational trauma. But, you have to forgive yourself, and then you have to forgive a lot of other people. And Desmond Tutu talks about the need for a cohesive narrative in a family. And that is what creates a strong family, is that stories are told and they are shared family, and they can become part of the identity of the next generation. And so my daughters, when they're old enough and when they can understand the full information, I will tell them about their older sister, and I will share this story with them, and I will share this book with them. Not until they are old enough, but this will be part of who they are. That I went through this journey. This is not just my journey. It doesn't just belong to me.
And in this way too, like putting this down means that this is you and your experience of it. So that can't be changed. It's this
Right.
idea of like, there's so many things in history where, the it was a retelling, or the things were written and things were destroyed in wars and all sorts of, horrible things, when people kill culture that way. But this is putting it on paper in your own way so that there is like your daughters can read it
Yes.
for as many times as they want, and they can think about it, and your oldest daughter will always have a place. Like she will not fade, because she won't fade for you ever, but she won't also fade for anybody else.
That's right.
That she could have, had she not passed, she would have had that impact in their life.
And I have gone to great lengths, at great personal cost and sacrifice, to ensure that she is not used as a sort of narrative crutch or bit player in someone else's story. Because I believe that any mother would do that for her baby. And I would do that for my living children. And I do it for my children who are not living. You don't do that to my children. And I've had to protect my child who passed. And I've had to protect myself from a world that really sees this as like juicy copy. And, a titillating, emotionally resonant, topic on page 30 of somebody else's story. Nope, not on my watch. Like, not going to happen. And I will fight for other women who have that happen to them too. I will fight for you. No, because that's just a culture that eats its own. That is a culture that you're lying on the ground bleeding and other people come and suck off you. Like that, I will not stand for. And I didn't bring my children into this world to live in a culture like that.
And to set that, and setting the stage for that, for them, for generations to come. How do you go through the process now? Like, how does mechanically, like, how do you write about something like this? And because it involves going into a very, I imagine, deep and dark place, the deepest and darkest place.
Yeah.
And you have, how old are your kids?
Almost 4, and they're 16 months apart. So one is almost 4 and one is 2.5.
So they're active and they want to be around you, and they're, it's always that going on. So you have a startup, you are in this deep, deep, deep space when it comes to the writing and the processing and putting it all together. And then you also have, this, not to contrast, but to say like, there's this light of young, like toddler and preschoolhood and things like that. Like, it's so many different ranges of depth for one person to manage in a day or an hour, or if you have a 2.5-year-old, in 5 minutes, on their own space and your own space. Like, how does that shake out for you?
It's been a lot of practice. It's been a lot of practice in learning a skill that men are very good at, which is compartmentalization. Men are just so good at that. And I work with so many men because I work in tech. And so they've taught me a thing or two about compartment. I also use physical space. I don't write around my kids. I don't work around my kids. I put my phone and my computer away. When I am with my kids, we are having family time. I won't even go into the cost of childcare. I assume most of your listeners are parents. We are all aware of the unbelievable cost of childcare. It ain't easy, but I have found my way to some incredible support here in LA. So when my children are not with me, we have them in an incredible, beautiful preschool. I mean, the barometer I always use is this what I would have wanted when I was a 2.5-year, 3-year-old? If the answer is yes, like, great. And it's 5 minutes away. and it is reasonable in cost. And I have to get very compartmentalized about, okay, this is work time where I am being corporate me, and I am, you have to learn how to be an actor a little bit. Like, okay, now I'm on and I'm corporate this. And then I go back into writer mode. And I don't want to go too deep into the process because I'm still writing. So, I'll talk about the process some other date. But yeah, you gotta find that way to dig deep, but then come out.
Mm-hmm.
And something I do appreciate about writing is that I get to tell the story of the character Melissa, but then eventually I can be like, oh, I'm telling the story of the character Melissa. And I don't necessarily, I remember everything. At a certain point, you can be like, I'm telling her story. And it loses a bit of its emotional charge. You're like, I'm not telling the story that, I am telling her story.
Yeah. You give yourself that not the bubble wrap that you need to not crash into the sides.
And I'm telling it exactly as it happened. And, I'm telling it in the way that she experienced it, but I don't have to be in it in order to tell it.
Yeah.
It's just taken me 10 years to get there, but it's working for me for now.
Yeah. And I think too, like that I don't want people to think like, I have experienced this thing, what I need to do now is write about it. There's a 10-year gap in between. That I feel like that also needs to be shouted from the rooftops. Like you can't just walk from the fire right to the computer.
That was so hard for me because I wanted another baby. I just went, God, please give me another baby and that will heal my soul. And I did get that, but it had to get so much worse before it got better. And then even once it got better, then it got worse again. And then it got worse again. And yeah, I have a happy ending. I have a stunningly happy ending in a way that there was no, I was divorced. I was a divorced, grieving mother at the age of 39. Like, what are the odds there? Nobody tells you being out on the market as a divorcee is great at 39. And they certainly don't tell you, as a grieving mother, it's a great scene. I happened to meet I found my way to my life partner who had arguably been kind of my life partner all along. And then, boom, we're pregnant. And then boom, we're pregnant again. And then here are these gorgeous, healthy babies. So I had to get my happy ending. And it's still not over because there's a whole nother book that starts right after we have the babies, because then you're mothering with trauma. You're mothering in an environment that already kind of doesn't really support you. And you're mothering working in tech in an AI startup. It's just like,
yeah.
Oh no, there's a whole new sort of
next.
Great. You climb Everest and you immediately get to another bigger Everest. And you're like, all right. But that's kind of the healing journey. People don't talk about the healing can be almost worse than the wound. But and now a lot of people choose not to do it for that reason. And I honor that choice because it is painful. Healing is painful. If you had to ask me, how have you done everything you've done? I have learned how to take pain. I wake up every day and I take punches in the face. And then again, I love watching sports stars. You watch Mike Tyson and you're like, how'd you get so good? I woke up every day and I took punches in the face. So I'm like, okay, Mike Tyson, I feel you. We have something in common. My punches aren't literal, but they are brutal. And they're less brutal now. Every day they're a little less brutal because every day you learn, you get stronger. You do. But I don't judge anybody if they're like, I don't choose a healing path. I'm going to just I'm going to find a life that works for me and then I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to maintain it. Well, I don't choose that. It's just not, it just doesn't work for me, but I respect anybody's decision. Healing is not for everybody because it is not always fun or pretty. I do it because I believe it, because it's worth it for me.
Yeah. And you also too are, again, you're creating, like, I think people may not choose to do it because it's like, well, it's too hard and nobody else is doing it. There is that idea, right? It's like we all just sort of like,
I'll give them my story. I'll give them my story. And it's also not linear. And it doesn't always look pretty. And sometimes you are literally like, I thought I was halfway up the mountain and I have now realized I am right back at the bottom. And I don't know if there's any way this is ever going to work out well for me. But you get up every day and you keep going anyway. And that is one of the biggest lessons I've learned for anything in life. That's like faith and betting on yourself and the ability to take risk and the ability to handle setbacks and be resilient no matter what you are going to accomplish in this life. You're creating your podcast, having 4 children. Those skills are required there to do what you do, to do what anyone does, to fulfill their destiny in this life, to fulfill their highest purpose, to do what makes them happy and to have a full life. You are just going to have those things. Unless, you lead a very beautiful, privileged, happy life, in which case, wonderful for you. Some people are, I believe, manifest in this lifetime to have a relatively easy life, and that's great. But the rest of us, it ain't so easy.
And I think too, like the talking about like the sports stars and the literal punches in the face, like I think on probably, a worse day, someone would rather take a punch in the face than what that feels like. And so
1000%.
I think that there's so much that's out in general, like out for general consumption that is related to like, the Tom Bradys and the Michael Jordans and all of these people that do these great and wonderful things that get paid a lot of money, that have people to support them, that, yada, yada, yada. But like, I mean, I don't really understand the whole modeling thing, but like, no one was surprised when Giselle was like, yeah, I'm done now. Like when you come back out of retirement, I don't know a single woman that wasn't like, yeah, no, I get that. I totally get that. I don't care who you are. Like you said you were going to do a thing and you didn't do a thing. And like, I'm also me. So I'm leaving too. But I think that one of the big pieces that I really want people to hear from other people is this notion of, it's not every day, but the stories of true grit. Like, I'm not talking about like having your own like sports drink and personal chef and all that stuff. I'm talking like you are in a hole that you never asked for. You did everything right. You did everything that you were supposed to do. You followed every direction, you whatever. And even if you didn't, nobody deserves to be there, right? No one deserves that. And
No one.
and you get left, right? Like there's no chef who's like, let me make you a postpartum smoothie because you're having a bad time. It's like, you're there and looking around and being like, the only person that is going to get me out of this is me.
Yep.
And I might slip and fall, like coming out of the hole some days, and I may want to lay in this hole for a little while. But at the end of the day, like, I don't belong here because I don't want this for myself. And it's going to be really hard to get out of it, but I am going to get out of it. And I'm going to figure out whatever is on the outside of this hole. But I'm not going to get it if I stay here.
That's exactly right. I mean, I people would ask, oh, if there's something people love to say, because they are trying to be kind and loving, or they're trying to be compassionate, as they say, if there's anything we can do. And I was literally like, you can go to the store and get toilet paper, because do you know how traumatic it is right now for me to go to the grocery store and have all the people at the grocery store be like, how's the baby? Oh, you had your baby. Also, do you know how short I am for money right now? Do you know how survival mode I am right now?
Mm-hmm.
I need toilet paper. I need I need help paying my rent. Is anyone going to help me with that? Like, there is no personal chef there. I mean, if you're wealthy in this house, look, wealthy people are not immune from horrific loss. Sheryl Sandberg had her horrific loss not that long after mine. And I was really angry because the lean in culture, I felt, really failed me, because I leaned in during that pregnancy and it didn't do me any good. And I honestly don't believe any woman should lean in. I believe that the workforce should be somewhat redefined so that women can bring new humans into the world until we have a way of reproducing humanity through, Matrix style mass reproduction. Women are the ones essentially handing over their bodies, their minds, their physiology, everything to create babies, our time, our money. And I felt that lean in really did me a disservice and then made me feel worse after I lost my baby. And then made me feel doubly worse after I had to shutter my business.
Yeah.
So my point, though, is that, Sheryl Sandberg's net worth was in the billions. She tragically lost her husband and the father of her children. You are not immune from loss just because you're wealthy. But what wealth gives you is that cocoon that the rest of the world does not give you. And it gives you, some protection. It gives you access to services. It gives you the ability to cocoon for as long as you need. And I didn't have that. It was just me bleeding and the world. And it was not easy. And I know I am not the only one. So I think there's so much else that our culture could do to cultivate more acceptance of tragic death and loss, particularly of children, particularly of babies and infants, and to just have protocols and things that are the norm other than, I'm so sorry for your loss. Let me know if there's anything I can do. If there's anything you can do. You can invent trauma therapy that doesn't involve being on meds for the rest of your life. Like, I don't know what
right.
You can put a hit out on, my OB. You can, I don't know, there were many things. I don't mean what. It's not literal. That was a joke, obviously. But, you can help me throw plates and channel my rage at people who were cruel to me when I was going through this. You can protect me from people who want to exploit me in the aftermath. That's what you can do for me. I'm
I mean, either way.
And the other biggest thing that was done for me by my ex-mother-in-law, who has now left this earth, but was such a deeply empathetic and compassionate person, sit with me and hold space for me in this much pain. And that's not a small thing. It is not a small thing. Because everybody's just going to be like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't imagine. Let me send you a card. Well, how about sit with me and in my darkness? Because I'm alone here. So even just having someone sit for half hour and just be in it with me is so meaningful. And my ex-mother-in-law did that. She was the only person, one of the only people who really did that for me. And I will never forget it. And so it's a journey. that's what I can.
And where do you see the journey going now? I mean, you never saw the journey coming to the place that it's at, but where, given where you are and all that you have overcome, what's on the radar for you?
Well, I got through the 10 years and I told myself, if I get through the 10 years, okay, that's a huge milestone. And I got through the 10 years and I have my beautiful children and I have my loving husband and we have our company and I have my career ahead of me. And now I'm ready. I'm talking to thought leaders like you in this space. I'm ready to go out there and share and speak. And hopefully, my goal is to bring real light into the darkness for people who need it. And you could be 15, 20 years out, 30 years out and have your children now or your children grown or whatever and still be in darkness. Maybe you just put the darkness aside because you had to, but the darkness is still there and maybe now you're ready to look at it. It's not a people who are deep in it from yesterday thing necessarily. There are people hurting from these kinds of losses from 30 years ago. My grandmother went to her grave in pain from that loss. And that's my goal.
I think that's incredible. And I do want to say in all of this, the strength that it takes to share, not just because of the expectation that is completely unfounded that people carry on and, carry on, but that the strength that it takes to you have to walk through this again as you're writing about it, as you're talking about it. And like you say, it feels sometimes it may feel like it's an over there thing as you're telling it in a more, I guess, storytelling kind of way versus a first person account of it, but that it is an incredible it's an incredible thing that you're doing. And I hope that every person that you encounter along the way understands, not from their own personal experience, because you never want this to happen to anybody else, but I hope that people understand the depth of strength and grit and tenacity that it takes as a human being to have first gone through this yourself, made it to the other side, and then are not slamming the door behind you, that you are holding the door for other people to come through so that they don't get stuck in that pit. They don't get stuck trying to figure out where the light is, that you are building the lighthouse. So I think it's incredible. And I am just, I think I have no words. It's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate that.
Yeah, I just, it is that element of like, I'm so sorry for your loss. It's like, there's no, you can't put a bow on something like this, and you can't zhuzh it up and make it whatever it is. But the fact that you're going to help countless people, you're going to help countless people that you don't ever meet or that you don't ever know that see the book. But, there's going to be some woman that walks by a bookstore one day and sees this book who has experienced this, and she's going to buy it. And it may make all the difference for her. And so, like, in all of what you're doing, like, think about that and how you're going to leave that impact on so many people's lives that you'll never get to meet. But I hope you meet all of them. I hope you have a book signing and everybody shows up and they tell you how wonderful you are, and Rush Limbaugh can whatever. But
I'll just say, I don't need to be told how wonderful I am. I'm also frankly kind of an introvert. I don't need to meet a lot of people in person. I love telling stories, and I believe in the healing and transformative power of story. And that is what I want to give to this earth. And that is what I want to give to women and their partners and anyone else who needs it and deserves it, which is, when I say deserves it, everyone deserves it. Everyone deserves catharsis. Everyone deserves healing from their trauma. I don't need to meet everybody, and I don't need to be told I'm great.
Right.
I look at my children's faces and I'm unfulfilled. I feel all the love in the world. So, don't worry about me. But I deeply appreciate you acknowledging why I am doing this and what I am doing it for.
This is what Lean In should have been.
Well, I don't want to be a hater. Everything has.
I don't hate her, but this is the lean in that I think that people really. I get the corporate lean in, but we needed
the lean in of that time so that it could, everything has its moment, and then it leads to the next thing. So we needed, Sheryl Sandberg is an incredible person, mother, operative, executive. In no way am I trying to discount her contribution. I'm just saying that at that time, that book hit me really hard. I'm not the only one, but in no way am I trying to, take away from anything that another woman has done.
Yeah. As you sort of move on in the process, I hope that you keep us up to date on when things are coming, when publishing is happening, all of that. Not to put a timeline on anything, but that I know that, like you said, people need the lighthouse. And so I would love to support that in any way, shape, or form to spread the message around it. So
thank you so much. And I absolutely will. And thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah.